So today we're learning how to rekey an ignition cylinder. Here we have all the components that usually come with the kit. Different kits vary, but you have the basic, tumblers here, the springs that go inside of the cylinder to help the tumblers pop out of position when the key is out of the cylinder. Here's the actual cylinder itself that the tumblers are going to go in, and a little packet of grease, the housing for the cylinder, and the instructions. So every cylinder is fairly much the same. You just have to figure out what order to put the tumblers in. So in order to figure out which tumblers go where, there's a diagram here that has different measurements, and according to the distance on those measurements between this point and this point would determine what number tumbler you put in. And if you look here, it'll tell you which code to use for which distance. It also tells you what measurement to use to determine where to measure on the key to determine which tumbler to use. So here it'll say, if you could read that, 5.08 millimeters from the tip of the key to this point would determine where station 8 would be, and the same for the rest of them, just different measurements. If you have the old cylinder and you have it apart, you'll be able to determine the order that way, but in this case I don't have the old cylinder, I just have the key itself. So this is pretty much what the picture shows. I drew the lines on there to kind of show you what areas I want you to measure, and after measuring all those you'll be able to write down the code there to know which tumblers to use. So when looking at the cylinder itself, you'll see the slots there in the cylinder. That is where the tumblers will slide into. The little circular portion of it is where the spring sits. So when you insert those, you'll want to use this grease to kind of lubricate everything. And if you look on the diagram, it looks like station 2 gets skipped. So you'll notice there's a portion here that shows a blank space, so that would be the station 2 that is crossed out. So this would be 1, and you'd work in that order, inserting the proper keys, which come here in the bag, and they're all labeled 1 through 5. So here's a cylinder partially assembled. I got most of the keys in except for one of the tumblers, because I wanted to show you exactly where the parts go. But here is where the spring goes. If I can get that to stay steady. So it goes right in there. So you can see it right here. It just slides into that hole there. And the tumbler has this little leg on it, and that's what sits on top of the spring and pushes the tumbler back out. So you just slide that in there, and you'll want to kind of wiggle it and pop into place there. And now you can see all of them are in there and they're all moving freely. So if we put the key in, they should all sit flush with the housing. Let's give that a shot. Okay, so now we have the key inserted, and you can see all the tumblers are sitting flush with the cylinder itself, so that will allow the cylinder to turn within the housing. You'll see where it has those notches where the tumblers normally sit. Once the key's in there, the tumblers will go into the cylinder and allow it to spin inside of that. So when installing the cylinder into the housing, each vehicle is going to be different. This one, you just have to make sure there's a little portion where the key goes through. You have to make sure it's in a certain position. You can see there's a little lip that sticks up, so you'd have to turn it so that the cylinder goes all the way into the housing and it'll be flush. There's also a little tab here that has to line up in this groove here, so it goes in a certain way, if you can see that on the bottom there. And once you put that in, you have to push the tumblers in to be able to go into the housing. You can see right there, sticks when they stick out. You'll have to push them down to kind of help it into the housing. And the last one should go in, and there it is. It's all inside. Everything's assembled. So, like I said, that's going to differ between different vehicles. This one, it has the instructions here on how the pieces go together. This one's pretty simple. Every other vehicle is pretty much the same, with the exception of the housing. You know, this is going to be different, or it might not have these little pieces, but it's pretty easy to figure out what goes where off of the diagram, and that's pretty much what it takes to rekey your cylinder.